Welcome to the Talent Development Hotseat. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you are joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And I've got a really great conversation for you today. We're talking about HR transformations. We're talking about intentionality and employee experience. We're talking about creating an intentional and inclusive people strategy, among other things. My guest today is Sanjit Kaur, who is the Chief People Officer of Cox Automotive International, a leader in the automotive sector with over 3,000 employees across the UK, Europe, Brazil, and Australia, where she leads people strategy across multiple markets. Sanjit has multi-industry experience and deep expertise in the HR industry, talent development, and organizational transformation, and is passionate about culture, wellness, giving back, and developing the next generation of HR talent. Her passion to support the next generation of HR talent has been recognized through external accolades received by her recent Inspiring Women Automotive 30% Club Award and Northern Power Women's Award UK. Sanjit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy, for that great introduction.
So happy to have you here. We've had some really great conversations since we met a few months back at the HR World Summit. And I know you have a great story as well as have accomplished many things in your role there and a lot of your experience so far in HR and talent development as well. And I know some of these things are ongoing, but I'm excited to get into them. And I'm curious, if we go back a bit to the beginning, how did you get into the HR world in the first place?
Yeah. So my journey in HR actually started about 6 years into my career, which initially was in contact centers. So graduated from university, had to pay off an overdraft, really started in a frontline role context. So, answering calls, customer service, really in operational sort of types of roles. I then sort of took the leap of faith into a inclusion and diversity role, which happened to sit clearly in the HR function. So I sort of stumbled into HR, but have since been in HR over 25 years. And I've absolutely enjoyed every single role, whether it's been sideways, backwards, even sometimes. I think there's always something to learn when you are looking after people.
Yeah. And you said every role, as you have grown in your career and moved up into the Chief People Officer role, have you focused in very specific areas of HR, or have you worked in a lot of different areas of HR?
I've worked in, I would say, a lot of different business areas. So sometimes the HR BP role has been the same role, but if I'm really being honest, Andy, where I think I have really utilized just my personality is every 2 to 3 years, I've sort of really set my development and growth of going in and operating in a different business area. And I think that is crucial for any HR generalist role. So by that, for example, when I was doing a HR role in contact centers, I then transitioned into like the global business markets where their people plan was totally different from a business area where it was customer service, it was high volume attrition, it was recruitment. And I think just having those different stakeholders, the different business areas, Santander, my previous sort of organization, had 5 different business areas. By the time I left over a 20-year period, I've supported each of those 5. And I think that is what has helped me then elevate and sort of work in the role that I'm in now.
Not everybody necessarily gets a chance to work in a lot of different business areas, but I'm curious, given that you got a chance to start in contact centers, working more frontline, working in different business areas, business units, how and where has that helped you as you've grown in your career in HR?
I think it gives you that variety and it gives you that context. And just to be really honest, all of those changes haven't necessarily been promotions. It's where I have really been intentional about my growth and development. Sometimes it's been projects. Sometimes it's me just been raising my hand to say I'd like to get involved more as part of my day job. So sometimes it's been just really asking and looking at the networks, looking at the opportunities to actually upskill yourself. And I think what and how that's really helped me is understanding how your HR and your people strategy is pivotal to the business strategy, and how you can really influence in areas where traditionally HR has been seen as more transactional
Right.
and administrative. And my one learning, if there's anybody listening to this podcast, is you have to talk in the language of the business. You have to understand the numbers. You don't have to be an expert, but understand how can your areas of your people strategy influence the business strategy. So in contact centers, for example, where we had peaks and troughs in attrition, where we're spending, on average more days to hire, it all impacts the bottom line. But as HR professionals, if you can tell that story, and you can articulate how all of this impacts the business strategy, I think it's really insightful on how you can elevate the role of HR.
Yeah, that's really important. When I speak with successful HR and talent development leaders, that often comes up, the importance of really understanding the business and speaking the language of the business. And that leads me to one of our main topics, which is this idea of going through an HR transformation. So many companies are thinking about this, are going through some type of transformation. I know that you've been embarking on your own HR transformation. How do you think about approaching that from an HR perspective, and also making sure that it's connected with, it makes sense for the business, that it's strategic as well?
Yeah. I think for any HR transformation, and I'll share a little bit more about the journey I've been on, is you have to have the investment. And again, you have to have that buy-in from the top as to, okay, well, why would we invest in HR technology transformation where it's traditionally seen as a support function? There's so many business areas competing for CapEx. And one of the things that, again, my experience has taught me is what's the value and what's the benefit it's going to drive for your business. So when I started here at Cox Automotive 7 years ago, they'd only just bought in a HR system. And yes, it served its purpose, but it's not going to serve its purpose for the growth of the organization. So for example, as we expand in Europe, having all of these different platforms, not having one source of truth from a people data perspective. People data should absolutely be your single point of truth. And every single people process, right from attraction to development, through recruitment, through onboarding, it all has to be joined up so that we can be really effective and efficient, not only in core HR processes, but as we move forward into a world where AI will become more prevalent, how can we become quicker and effective at some of the standard processes that we do, to then enable HR professionals to deliver strategic value, to deliver business change and transformation. I know we can do so many more things effectively and more efficiently. And as I stand here today, one thing that I'm really proud of is we've done all of that legwork. We've done all of the business case to be able to convince our board as to why the CapEx, or some of our CapEx, needs to be invested in our HR transformation.
When you are making that big decision and you're preparing, we'll say, an argument to the business that we need to make this investment, what's one of the most important or best things that you've done there? And were there any mistakes that you made along the way that people could learn from?
Yeah. I think one of the things, well, you've got to have a business case and you have to be able to articulate the why. And some of the why for us was also about how do we drive a more inclusive experience for our team members. So this will be different for every organization, but our organization has a mix of blue collar workers, white collar workers. We don't always make it easy for some of our operational team members, where even simple processes like booking holidays, accessing your payslip, we have so many manual processes. So one of the things that really helped us is this was 12 months in the making for us to gather what was the current state, where are we being inefficient in the business. So for example, in our operational teams, lots of spreadsheets going back and forth, lots of manual processes for overtime, for workforce planning. Me and the project team have been able to articulate to the business how we can take and remove some of these pain points so that the operational team members can actually focus on the role that they're doing, and leaders can spend less time doing manual processes, which is taking them away from having quality performance conversations, having quality talent conversations, not in having more time to invest in their teams, which ultimately leads to engagement. So I think if I was to summarize it under your question, I would be, have your business case, understand it's not just about technology, it's also about improving the team member experience. And ultimately, it's about return on investment. I, have articulated to the board how this investment will actually help us with our, with our ambition for growth and for retention.
You mentioned employee experience in there. I know that's something you've been big on in your role, creating an intentional employee experience. Wonder if you could talk more about that, the importance of employee experience, and how and why you approach it that way.
Yeah. And this, all HR professionals will know and talk eloquently about engagement, how it impacts the bottom line, why is it important. I think the differentiating factor is actually seeing it, touching it, and believing it. So I talk really regularly about a culture that cares. And I will say, yes, whilst we are the custodians of the culture, so should our leaders be the custodians of the culture. So I think you've got to be really intentional about, it's not just words on a PowerPoint. Do our leaders, do our team members absolutely live the values of the organization? And that is something I think, through a number of things like our employee resource groups, our European culture and engagement team, our investment in our leadership development and capabilities, you can see how it red threads through your business strategy, and creating that environment where your team members do feel cared about, they feel listened to, where leaders are creating that safe space for teams to come up with ideas, to challenges, where they feel they've got that environment to share those examples where, they can affect change, they can share their ideas. I think that is practical examples of where I feel our business has really, really empowered this culture that cares. And, one thing that I can share with you, Andy, is I see and hear firsthand, lots of examples where sometimes, our people do leave us, clearly, and they go and work in different organizations. But where our people have returned, one of the trends that I consistently hear about is they returned because of our culture. Because to Cox Automotive, it's not just, something that's on a PowerPoint or on a poster. The feedback's been our culture is one that cares.
That's one of those things, right, that we hear a lot about how important culture is, a culture eats strategy for breakfast, but it's not so easy to articulate exactly how to create that culture. But it goes into that employee experience that you built. Is there anything else you would add regarding how to be intentional with creating a culture that attracts and retains great talent?
Mm. I think one of the things, and I think just personally, if I reflect on my experiences, I think even after COVID, well-being, listening strategy, you have to be more intentional about creating one of those safe spaces. You have to be more intentional. If you're, in any senior leadership role, it starts from the top. Yeah. So I think it almost like you've got to have a top-down strategy and a bottom-up strategy. Yes, it is for leaders, but where are you creating those safe spaces to get those ideas up across all business areas, across all functional centers of expertise, linking it then into your marketing and your communication. I always talk about that red thread. And I think one thing that I would share with any of your listeners is culture just doesn't happen, by stealth. You've got to be intentional. And I think if you're privileged to be in any leadership or people manager role, you've got a big part to play in that. So how do you give those people the right development, the right time, the right understanding as to why their role is so important? I always say to my leaders, how you behave, how you treat people, how you make them feel, how you get them involved in, not just delivering the objectives of the organization, but how they deliver it. You're fundamental as part of that process.
So true. And I want to get to leadership development because leaders do define so much of a culture. Before we do, though, I know you've also been big on creating an inclusive people strategy. You mentioned creating safe spaces. I know you've put programs together around wellness and inclusivity. Can you talk more about the importance of making sure that your people strategy is inclusive, making sure that people feel like they are involved or they're in the right place?
Yeah. I think that we're, as an organization, just looking at the data and the metrics and understanding our organization, we've currently got 5 generations within the organization. Each of those generations, will want things in different ways, or they will have different needs. So I think coming back to that inclusive piece, I think first and foremost is understanding the demographics of your business. It's understanding, okay, how one size does not fit for everyone. So I think from a leadership perspective and an ELT perspective, we are very cognizant of the values of our business. And I think, creating your employee resource groups, understanding what's important to our people, having that consistency as well. Just, it might be 1 or 2 small wins in certain teams, which might then roll up and lead to bigger strategic changes. A great example is just things like the environment of some of our traditional auction houses. We've invested because we know it's important to people when you're in an operational role, what that environment looks like. And there might be some simple things like that, in addition to more strategic ideas that we've had by just creating those safe spaces. So I think, look, it's always iterative. I don't think there's one magic bullet to culture, but a big part for us, certainly in 2025 and what will continue to be for 2026, is investment in the learning, growth and development, not just of our leaders, but for our team members as well.
I love to hear that as someone who's passionate about learning and development, as all of our listeners are in our talent development community. Where and how do you make the business case for that? And I guess the other question I want to ask around inclusivity is how do you make sure that those learning programs are inclusive as well?
Yeah. So I think, look, I can be honest, you asked one of the questions earlier about sort of, I wouldn't say failures, but opportunities. Our learning and development as a business has grown, has also started to get a lot more mature. So a few years ago, we focused on certain things, but it was quite, what's the word? I would say it was bespoke for individual business areas. The last couple of years, we've really focused on what is the L&D strategy, yeah? Where do we need to dial up, not only for leadership and development, but for technical skills? If you think about the automotive industry now with electrification, with the skills and capabilities that we will need, not just now, but in 3, 5, 10 years' time. So for example, then our apprenticeship programs, whilst once they were focused on sort of soft skills, they're now a blend of technical, soft leadership skills. So you've got the apprenticeship bucket, which is one part. You've got your leadership and development, which is another part. So I think you've got to, again, constantly be thinking about what are the skills, what are the capabilities, and what is the growth mindset within the organization. Are you recruiting the right talent with the right skills and capabilities to drive the business strategy going forward in the long term? And, if I'm being really honest, again, it's always iterative. It's always moving on as the world out there is moving on. AI is a brilliant example.
Yeah.
Every single department, every single business is looking at how will AI impact their area of the business. Where should it impact? Where should it not impact? And again, we're doing the same as part of our HR function. So I think it's just really keeping abreast of everything that's happening both internally and externally in the.
Yeah, I want to talk about AI and future skills, but I'm curious about the apprenticeship program that you mentioned. Not a lot of companies have those anymore. So, what does that apprenticeship look like? Apprenticeship program look like, and how does it benefit the organization?
Yeah, so the apprenticeship program, certainly from a UK perspective, is it's a local government funded sort of scheme in terms of any organization with, I think it's something like a salary bill of £3 million or more, they have to actually contribute to what we call the apprenticeship levy. So the apprenticeship levy really is about how do these organizations who fall into this scope then invest as part of early careers in bringing in talent into the organization. Yeah. It's also about how can you utilize that levy for training, development, and skills and multi-skilling. And the levy can be tapped into. It's not just bringing new people in, it's training and development and professional accreditations, from your existing populations. So we currently have something like, and we actually had a graduation day last week where 90 or so of our people currently on an apprenticeship program have graduated in some form of professional development. So that could be a master's level, it could be their HR exams, it could be their professional financial qualifications. But in summary, these programs are co-funded by the government. And it's really important, just to sort of explain how does the apprenticeship schemes work, how do you have access to them, and how can you utilize some of that levy for the benefit of your people. And the best way to summarize it for Cox Automotive is 3 to 5 years ago, there was limited understanding of how to even tap into this. Whereas we've spent quite a lot of education, we've spent a lot of time upskilling our leaders on how we can tap into these programs as part of being in a levy and how can we get the most of them. So I think that's where our success has been this year.
Yeah, so that ties in. There's unique to the UK, but also thinking about where things are going and how we can prepare people for the future. You mentioned leadership as well. I'm curious if you could share your approach to leadership development. And I know specifically you've built a middle manager program, which a lot of organizations have been thinking about, but don't necessarily have in place yet.
Yeah, I think historically we had quite a lot of focus on some of our executive leadership programs, tapping into our parent organization for some programs with the US. I think following COVID in particular, one of my ambitions was, well, how do we really invest in those like middle manager programs? Because those are the people who are managing a lot of the operational teams, managing high volume in terms of numbers. And that was the missing gap for us. So what we've done is, again, we've had some of this funded through the apprenticeship levy, but we've designed these programs as part of 6 to 9 month programs. So not only do you get some development coaching and you get the actual technical part of it, but then you then go back into the business, practice, coach, and then you do your model. So really like modularized, but enough time to be able to give the leaders the impact and the intent to go out and practice what they are learning. And the feedback so far is, I think, just having those times and interventions to go back and practice in the workplace really supports them with their development. And I think, one of the key takeaways I would take from all our programs is it's not just development for what they do in the business. So working both on the business, but working in the business as well. So it's also how do you drive the business forward, but also how do you become more effective in the role that you're doing?
Yeah. How do you approach how do I want to ask this? Uh, What does the structure of the program look like? How do you think about the mix of getting people together in person versus doing things virtually these days? And I'm also curious if you work with outside providers or if you build everything internally.
Yeah, great question. I mean, we've done the programs themselves have absolutely been blended. Yeah, we know people like face-to-face interaction. Some it depends on people's learning styles, but we've also like the blended part where it's been a mix between online as well. So that part of it has worked really well. And I think this comes down to the planning as well, being really intentional about which days are going to be face-to-face. Sounds really simple, but as much as you can do, plan all of that beforehand, makes it ensures people get to the right places and the right training days that are going to be face to face and physical. I think one of the other things we've done, which have really helped us, is to understand we have worked with partners, and where we've worked with some partners, we've worked with them to get them to come into our business. We've got them to talk to leaders. As part of the consultation, we've got them to talk to the board. What skills and capabilities are we hoping to drive? What are the objectives of these programs? We've done a lot of 360 feedback with not only the participants, but their leaders, to make sure the programs are fit for purpose and not just off the shelf programs that, will not add any value to the business.
Hmm. So you're looking for things that are going to be either customized to the business, or you can show that they understand the business or they relate to the challenges that your managers are going through.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things about the programs as well is when you're in a matrixed organization, some of these leaders have been here for a long time, some are more new to role. But one of the soft skills that the programs have helped to deliver is this appetite and this having this infectious sort of skill to network and problem solve, not only within your own business area, but horizontally across the organization. One of the biggest learning, I know I'm speaking to a talent expert, is just creating that environment and that culture to say it's okay to go and spend a day or half a day in another business area, because you can collectively resolve business problems together. That has been the biggest aha moment from all of our manager essential programs and our accelerate programs.
So that's getting these managers together and having them work together on challenges in different business areas, even if they are going outside of their normal business area.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to create that collaboration, create that co-collaboration, and create that network across the organization. As our business continues to evolve, technology is the red thread that runs through all of the operating business areas. So some of these groups just interfacing with technology experts, product engineering, it's really created this, oh, that person over there can really help me with this business problem that I've got. And previously I wouldn't have known that's the person, or that's the person who actually does this as the part of their day job.
Interesting. Last thing I want to ask you about is career growth and how you think about supporting your employees, the employees there, in growing their careers. So, what's the approach to career development, and what resources do people have access to be able to grow in their careers?
Yeah. So I think obviously we've talked about the apprenticeships, we've talked about programs. I think this also is more cultural in terms of how you actually encourage that growth mindset. So, like any organization, we have a career framework, we have our job architecture, but I think it's been really explicit as part of your talent strategy, really digging into your, again, being really intentional about it, your potential, looking at your performance. But, from a potential perspective, I regularly meet with my ELT. We regularly talk about our people. So again, it's really understanding from a retention perspective, where are our gaps, becoming a more of a skills and capability lens on talent as well. So again, it's really deep diving into our long-term people strategy in terms of where do we really need to focus.
Mm.
I think, for simple sort of everyday things, like in addition to the programs, is we do really encourage going out and working cross-functionally and going and spending time in different business areas, right from our onboarding to like the first 6 to 12 months into an organization, right throughout. So again, I think, even the culture piece is really big. I just think from a talent perspective, we've done a lot this year on storytelling. And I think that has really helped some of our junior roles understand what is the art of the possibility from a mobility perspective. So if they've got a particular interest, in terms of how they want to develop and grow, sharing role models. We've done a big feature on all of the ELT sort of stories and how they've progressed through their careers. So, even I've shared my story that, I started in a contact center environment, as we talked about earlier, and some of the challenges and some of the things I've had to navigate from my perspective. But when you then start sharing those stories across all levels, across all functions, those who do want to develop and progress, see these role models and think, yeah, I could actually aspire to be in that role if I choose to be.
Right. And so you want to provide the resources and the opportunities, but at the end of the day, you want your people to take ownership of their careers, to figure out what they want to do and start taking advantage of those and making moves or designing a vision or goals for where they want to go.
Absolutely, because I think it does, as part of our performance development culture, that is something we really hone down on, is like our role is to provide what are those opportunities, and providing those opportunities, whether it's learning, whether it's development, whether it's growth. But from a team member perspective, they also have to own that development. We are there as leaders to help navigate, coach, and guide. But that comes back, I think, to an organization that promotes a growth mindset, that promotes continuous improvement, and not only promotes it, but enables it. I will say to my team, for example, as part of their development, go out and actually spend time in the business. If you want to go and see a mock tribunal, if you want to go and work in a different part of the business, or even through your external contacts and partnerships with what are some of the things that they're doing in the people space, I've got to create that environment to make sure they feel they can go and do that, because that then creates engaged employees. It creates the opportunity. I mean, if you think about the conference where we met, that's because I'm being empowered to go to some of these external events. And I always think, sometimes it's a validation of what you're actually doing from a people strategy perspective. It's contacts, but sometimes it sparks one or two ideas that you think, okay, I can bring this back to my business. But if my leader didn't trust and promote that for me, then I wouldn't be in those sort of areas or those arenas where I can bring some of this learning back. But then my role is to do the same for my function. And then if all of your ELT members and all of your senior leaders are doing that, then naturally it all flows up to continuous improvement across all levels of the organization, across all roles.
And how does AI play a role in any of this? I know you mentioned AI tools earlier. I would imagine you have a goal, like many other organizations, to get people using AI more. Is that built into the career strategy now? Is there a way that you're using AI in talent development that could be useful to others?
Yeah. So I would, if I'm being really honest, I think we're really at the infancy of this. So we've got more to go. So at the moment, I think because we've got our HR transformation program around the corner, this is a great opportunity for us to weave it in and understand how our new transformation project will help us in some of the areas where we've been very traditional, like CV sifting, for example, attraction, recruitment. We've got some areas where we know there will be simple areas where we can scale. Things like role profiles, your job architecture. There are also many quick wins now that we think will be able to really step up our approach to be more effective and efficient with AI, but using it in a way where it's also the right way to use it. So I think from a business perspective, we are just starting right from the top from a technology perspective, and our CTO is really leading that transformation for us. But we are obviously red threading it through our transformation program. So we haven't got all of the answers to date, but we're very much looking into the areas which we know will help us from a people strategy perspective.
Absolutely. It's great to hear that. Last question for you, Sanjit. For those out there who are looking for ways to grow in their careers in HR, what's one more piece of advice you would give?
Yeah. I think, look, we always say, I'm sure everybody's heard this, be curious, be insightful, understand the business, understand the numbers. But, I would keep it really simple and say, look, you never stop learning and growing. Even after a 25-year career in HR and operational roles, my team will hear me say this every single time. Every day is a school day. Every interaction is a learning. Somebody who you meet, not even in the workplace, personally, professionally, everything is a learning sort of opportunity. So I would say, look, don't obviously, keep that growth mindset.
Yep.
The other thing I've just finished, actually, interestingly, I do regular skip level meetings with everybody in the function. And I can honestly say so insightful. And it's not about having an opportunity where everybody's either complaining or moaning about something. I see them as opportunities of how can I, as a leader of this function, improve not only the working lives of the HR function, but the business. So one of the things I regularly say in these skip level meetings, because I applied it to myself, was you can make your role, any role that you do, as big as you want or as little as you want. That's down to your personality. That's down to your drive. And there might be times in your life where, do you know what? You just want to do the bare minimum. But there also might be times in your life where you can do the stretch, you can learn more, you've got the capacity to learn more, you've got the potential to learn more. And when those opportunities come, all I would say is take them with both hands.
I love that. Lifelong learners, we have many of those in our community. I never feel like I have it all figured out. There's always more to learn, especially how quickly things are moving these days. I haven't talked a lot about the importance of continuous learning in my keynotes in my book. So it's very nice hearing that from you as well, Sanjit. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of your learning, so much of your experience, your wisdom. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well. And I look forward to staying in touch and talking more in the future.
Thank you.